Hello, BookTube. This is Weekly Reads. I started this reading week with this pain in my rear end, The Sleepwalkers by Christopher Clark. This is a diplomatic history of the lead up to World War I. It's divided into three parts. Part one looks at the two primary antagonists in the conflict, Serbia and the Habsburg Empire. Part two looks at the diplomatic dance amongst the other four great powers. So, alongside the Habsburg Empire, Germany, Russia, France, and Britain comprise the five great powers. So, at the beginning of this history, there was a concert of powers that there weren't strong alliances, particularly amongst France, Russia, and Britain. This gradually changed in the later 19th and into the early 20th century until the British, the French, and the Russians settled their imperial differences and formed the Entente, which then began to encircle Germany and began to characterize, propagandize Germany as the new big bad, which with British propaganda initially was France and then was Russia and then it became Germany. And then in part three, it's the July crisis, the assassination of the heir to the Habsburg thrones, and the diplomatic fallout that gradually led to war. So, why is the Sleepwalkers a pain in my butt? Well, I've been working on this book for about 3 weeks now, and I do not know what I make of my reaction to this book. It is objectively a good diplomatic history of the events that led to World War I. But I found myself taking every excuse I could to take a break from this book. I would, at every break in the chapter, I would get a drink, or I would go use the restroom, or I would get a snack, or I would hop on my tablet and browse the internet. I was looking for every excuse I could to not read this book. So, but when I was reading it, I kind of liked it. So I do not understand my reaction to this book at all. There were points, I think, during the work week when I'm more constrained in my reading where it was okay because it was easy, like it was nice bits of reading. But when it came to the weekend, when I do bulk reading, well, most of the day is devoted to reading, I was finding myself definitely then wanting to read something else or really wanting to take every break I could. So I don't know what to make of that. So I will probably at some point in the future come back to this book and maybe a reread will clarify things. Or not, I don't know. I mean, it could just be World War I is sort of one of those historical events that I do have a hard time reading histories of because it bugs me in some way that I'm not entirely sure how to vocalize, to talk about, that I don't quite understand it, so I don't know quite how to put it into words. What bugs me about those historical events. But anyway, so that was the Sleepwalkers. So my plan was to finish off November with more history since November was nonfiction November. So I had the idea to read Between Myra and McCarthy by Charlotte Brooks, and if I had time, Against the World by Tara Zahra. I did not have the time to do Against the World, so I did not read it. So I will put it back for another day. But I did get started on Between Mao and McCarthy by Charlotte Brooks. So this is a history of politics in the Chinese American community, primarily centered around San Francisco and New York between the 1930s and the 1960s. So the book looks at how initially Chinese American politics centered around Chinese politics and gradually reoriented itself towards American politics. The book also looks at how initially in the 1930s, New York's Chinatown had a greater political influence than San Francisco's due to the political machines in New York, primarily Tammany Hall, being amenable to bribes through contributions or donations. Whereas gradually, as these 30 years pass, gradually San Francisco's Chinatown becomes more politically prominent. So on the surface, the book sounds interesting. I could not get into it, and I decided to bail. And I do think Between Mao and McCarthy is an example of a book that and have a tendency I need to be aware of going forward, in that if I get a sale catalog from the University of Chicago Press or anybody else, that I need to be cautious. That just because a book is relatively cheap does not necessarily mean that I need to pick it up if it's mildly interesting. If I'm really interested, then yes, pick it up. But if I'm not, I don't need to. So anyway, that was Between Mao and McCarthy. So my next read was actually quite positive, and that was a reread of Before Our Eyes, New and Selected Poems 1975 to 2017 by Eleanor Wilner. So this is a collection of her poetry, and I read it over 2 days, and I quite enjoyed it. It was a bit slow getting into initially, but once I got into it, I really enjoyed revisiting these poems. It's been well over a year since I first read this collection. I read it, I think, in 2022 when I did a poetry project at the beginning of April of 2022, because I bought a large number of slim volumes of poetry from Princeton University Press, which I liked a good chunk of. So I really enjoyed this. And yesterday I read 2 volumes of manga that I had just hauled, which I think is probably an argument to actually do the piecemeal book hauls, because that way I can read the books as they come in rather than waiting until the following month. But anyway. So I started with Eden Zero, Volume 25 by Hiro Mashima. So Eden Zero is one of Hiro Mashima's current series. It's a space opera fantasy about a young man named Shiki who was raised by the great demon lord Ziggy, an android who served as the main antagonist of a medieval-themed tourist planet populated by androids. The androids on the planet are beginning to break down, and before Shiki is left all alone, a young woman named Rebecca and her Exceed companion Happy come to Granbell, the planet where Shiki has been raised, to film for her B-Cube channel. She meets Shiki. The androids seem to malfunction and try to kill Rebecca and Happy. Shiki rescues them and they flee the planet, and together the trio decide to become adventurers and go in search of the cosmic goddess figure, Mother. They find a ship, the Eden Zero, and slowly build a crew that becomes, over the years the series takes place in, they become a family. Volume 25 is the final volume in the Lindard arc. So it's revealed that Ziggy did not die, that he has come back to life, and that he's now operating on an anti-human or anti-organic life agenda. Ziggy has allied with two other major galactic criminals, Dead and Crow and God Noella, to produce a robot army. Shiki has formed an alliance with the space pirate Elsie, who has been a recurring ally of his in the crew of the Eden Zero, as well as members of the Oresensei's interstellar Union army to sort of fight Ziggy and his allies. Over the course of the conflict, Dead and Crow is destroyed, Godak Noella is destroyed, and Shiki and Ziggy have a final confrontation where many truths are revealed, and the planet Lindard is destroyed. And with the rescue of Rebecca's mother, basically the next big arc is set up for the final arc. So yeah, I really enjoyed this volume. It was quite fun, quite heartbreaking as well. So I'm going to show you some pictures. There's that. And then there's Ziggy powering up. And then that. Just and then just, yeah, it was just wonderfully well done. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. So the next one I read was, or the next volume of manga I read was Jujutsu Kaisen Volume 21 by Gege Akutami. So this series is set in contemporary Japan, and it's about a young man named Yuji Itadori who joins his school's occult club. The other club members find a cursed object, the rotten finger of an evil sorcerer named Ryumen Sukuna. A cursed spirit attacks the club looking for the finger, and the cursed spirit, a demon kind of created by negative human emotions, is engaged by a young Jujutsu sorcerer named Megumi. Yuji decides to help, and he helps by eating the finger of Sukuna, which allows Sukuna to temporarily possess Yuji's body. Now, in normal circumstances, this possession would be more permanent, but Yuji is capable of controlling the possessions. And Megumi's teacher, Gojo, decides that and argues that Yuji should be allowed to live at least long enough to be able to eat the other Sukuna fingers that are out there, so that Sukuna is completely killed. And so Yuji joins Jujutsu High and learns to become a Jujutsu sorcerer. While they're trying to find the remaining fingers of Sukuna, other villains are making their own moves, and Sukuna himself has his own agenda. So a character called Kinjaku has manipulated a number of strong curse spirits to launch a series of attacks on Jujutsu sorcerers and other moves to eventually launch a massive attack on Shibuya, the Shibuya incident, which served as fuel to enhance Kenjaku's own sort of machinations and plans, which resulted in parts of Tokyo largely being destroyed, and parts of Tokyo and other major areas in Japan being sealed off as part of a culling game in which a number of newly awakened sorcerers who just coming into their own powers, as well as a number of individuals who are being possessed by ancient sorcerers, are basically fighting in a series of death games, like one-on-one death battles, which are further fueling Kenjaku's plans. So the casts are basically split up into various colonies. And so this volume focuses on Tokyo Colony number 2, and primarily a new character called Kenichi Hikaru, who was a expelled student at the Tokyo Jujutsu school that Yuji and recruits to help in this conflict, since the main Jujutsu society has fallen into Kenjaku's hands. So initially, he fights a young wannabe manga artist, and later a character called Kashimo, which takes up the bulk of the fight. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, even though this volume was largely a fight. But it was really cool how the fights turned out and stuff. So there's the manga artist. And so, yeah, there's art there. And I'll show you some of the fight between, oh yeah, oh yeah, so it was fun. So that was what I read this past week. Since today's December 1st, I'm going to be starting the two booktube events that I'm participating in. Remember December and DNF December, or Bill Redemption December. So a lot of what I'll be reading this week will be for Remember December. So today I'm planning on getting to 3 volumes of manga. Dark Gathering Volume 1 by Kenichi Kondo. This is a series about a young man named Kaitaro who can see dead spirits, and he gets involved with a young girl who wants to do something with those spirits. I read this a few months ago and I didn't quite like it, but I want to give it another reread to see if I'm still not, what I think of the book. I'm also going to read volumes 1 and 2 of Moriarty the Patriot, based upon the work of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, but by Ryosuke Takeuchi and Hikaru Miyoshi. So Moriarty the Patriot is about James Moriarty, Sherlock Holmes' great antagonist. And in this version, Moriarty is a revolutionary. he's fighting against a corrupt, class-based British society that I remember quite liking Volume 1, so I'm hoping I'll have a good reaction to reread of Volume 1 and then enjoy Volume 2. So yeah. So then over the weekend, I'll get to the two big poetry collections that I want to get to. Poems by Elizabeth Bishop and A Little More Red Sun on the Human by Gillian Conoley. So both of these collections I have mixed feelings about. I have read both and really enjoyed it, but other readings I haven't had as much luck. And so I want to give these two one last read. Well, maybe not one last read, but one last read to decide whether or not I want to keep either collection in my collection. Because I am working my way through my library and deciding what books I want to keep and what books I want to ultimately donate. Although at the moment it looks like the science fiction and fantasy shelves are going to be obliterated. But anyway, and then over the course, and then once I finish each collection, if I have time, I'll possibly read some manga or do something else. And then over the work week, I will start on The Rats by Gunter Grass. This is a book that it has been a very long time since I have read, over 20 years. And the book is translated by Ralph Manheim, because I think I forgot to do the translation, who the translator is for this work when I talked about it last time. So that's my plan for this coming reading week. As far as videos that I plan to make next week, I don't know. I'm hoping I can do some discussion videos, but yeah, don't count on it. And hopefully there are some cool tags coming out and other things. But anyway, BookTube, that's all I got for right now. So thank you. Have a great afternoon and weekend, and stay safe.